Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to the FRRR Grant Seeker workshop on our new grant program. My name's Danielle Griffin. I'm the Philanthropic Services Manager for FRRR, who's managing this program, and we will also be joined by our partnership specialist at FRRR, Gillian Kerwin-Lee. So she'll be co-hosting with me today. Firstly, in the spirit of reconciliation, FRRR would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and on the lands that I'm coming to you from today, which is in Narooma, which is on Yuin country. I know you are coming from across Australia, which is really, really exciting. And I think, this grant program is really about, caring for country and many things that we are continuing to learn, and the fortune that we have in the custodianship of our country by the First Nations people that have been here for more than 60,000 years. Today, we'll tell you a little bit about FRRR, and then we'll give you an overview of the community-led Climate Solutions Grant Program. There'll be some time for questions after that, just to get some clarity there. And then we'll go into kind of grant seeking workshop in regards to some tips on applying for grants, and also some further questions there. So we are hoping this is interactive as possible, and that you can all get what you're trying to get from the program. We do ask that you put your questions in the chat as we're going through, because then when we get to question time, it's really easy for us to have a look at those questions and be able to answer them quickly. And as Gillian said, we will be sending this presentation through to you, so don't feel that you have to furiously be writing down notes. First of all, just a little bit about FRRR. We are the only national foundation specifically focused on ensuring social and economic strength in remote, rural and regional Australia. We were started by philanthropy and government in 2000, purely for this purpose, kind of recognising that there's a lot going on in regional Australia and remote Australia, and that access to funds is really difficult, and also understanding the unique context of people living in these areas. So I think that we are very unique as all those communities out there in really understanding that you understand what's going on in your community, and we're here to support you. With regards to this grant application, where it fits in regards to how we look at the resilience in Australia and how we can support that, it's really in this third pillar of disaster resilience and climate solutions. Specifically, we recognise that the biggest threat to the sustainability and viability of remote, rural and regional Australia is through the changing climate and the resulting natural disasters that are being experienced. And we know that the answers are lying in those communities that are experiencing them, understanding the people that live there, and also just understanding the place, the environment, and everything that goes with it. I'd now like to hand over to Gillian, and she will talk to you about the Community-Led Climate Solutions Grant Program.
Thanks, Danielle. So I guess just to give you some context as to how this program's come about, as Danielle briefly touched upon, I guess we know that remote, rural and regional communities are being disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. We also know that FRRR communities, FRRR communities are being disproportionately affected by economic transition. So for those, it may be some communities, it may be energy transitions are moving away from fossil fuels. It may be moving towards renewable energy solutions. It also may be other types of transitions, for instance, those communities who are moving away from timber industry. We also know that I guess rural and remote communities very often know these challenges best, and they also know the solutions to overcome them. And we know that there's a huge amount of innovation and great ideas in our regional communities. And from our previous experience in, I guess, focusing on a particular challenge, for instance, our In a Good Place program, which looks at mental health solutions, and also our Telstra Connected Communities program, which looks specifically at digital connectivity and connectedness. We know that by shining a light on those particular issues, we can really shift the needle. So that's how this program has come about. So broadly speaking, we're looking at, we're keen for this program to address reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the impacts of climate change towards a more sustainable environmental, social and economic outcomes in our FRRR communities. So this is open to any not-for-profit organisations who are keen to overcome these challenges. And it is, I guess, a matter of reducing those greenhouse emissions, but also dealing with the impacts of climate change in those communities. So with this particular first round that we've just recently launched, there's 360,000 available in grant funds for grants of up to 20,000. The projects that we're looking to support can be broad-reaching, I guess, broad-ranging in terms of those that drive engagement, education and leadership, to those that activate locally led opportunities to advance clean energy practices, mitigate the impacts of climate change, and also those that look to support just transitions to clean energy economies to help communities thrive. So the application, the grant round has already opened. It opened last week. It will close on the 30th of November with projects to be announced in March. And for those of you who have worked with us in the past, we typically give a window of 12 months for those projects to be completed. So look to be completing in April 2025. Oh, can you go to the excellent? Sorry, the previous one, Daniel.
No, but the next one is that one.
Oh, yes. Oh, no, not the partners one, the one looking at those specific, I think you might have just skipped one. Yep, that's it. Thank you. So the types of activities that can be funded are local events and activities that engage and educate communities on clean energy solutions and climate solutions. So I'll talk you through in a little while an example of Bendigo Sustainability Group, who we've supported in the past, who have run community education programs around clean energy solutions. In terms of projects that include First Nations land and sea management practices, this might include training in terms of cultural burn activities. Sorry, I just switched off my phone, it shouldn't be ringing. Regenerative practices for land and sea that support climate solutions. So this may be projects that are not Indigenous-led, but similarly demonstrating those climate solutions. Sustainable agriculture and food systems initiatives. So looking at an example might be a nursery, for instance, that's propagating native species that may have been affected by bushfires and whatnot to make sure to contribute to the biodiversity of that region. And also projects that reduce, reuse and recycle in terms of circular economy. Sorry, someone's really persistently trying to reach me. And we've got a great example of a community in South Australia that has run a number of, organised partnerships with the likes of their local CWA, with their local men's shed to run workshops about reusing, upcycling, mending, and generally creating awareness around landfill. Next one. So in terms of what will be prioritised, I guess those projects that demonstrate that they're locally led by not-for-profit organisations, and those that can demonstrate multiple benefits. I guess climate change solutions, but which have the obvious economic benefits and social benefits, as well as those environmental outcomes. So I guess that's something to consider in terms of your application, is that I'm sure most of the people on this call today have projects that will be able to demonstrate environmental benefit, but how can you further demonstrate the social and economic benefits that are likely to come about as a result of those projects? Projects that are evidence-based, that demonstrate strategic planning and sustaining program operations, and projects that are inclusive in supporting diverse community members will also be prioritised. As with most of the programs, the funding programs or granting programs that we operate, activities that will not be funded through this program are those that are considered to be the responsibility of federal, state and local governments. We unfortunately cannot fund core operational costs, for instance, rent, utilities or regular wages. An exception of this would be potentially looking at a short-term project management role for a particular event or something of that nature. Overseas travel and projects needs to be Australian-based in FRRR communities. Can't support prizes, gifts, trophies, political lobbying, projects that benefit private businesses, for instance, sole traders or private interests, projects that are solely focused on animal welfare, and those that encourage the advancement of sport recreation cannot be covered or not covered as charitable activities under Australian law. I guess we do support sporting organisations at times where they can demonstrate I guess broader community benefit. So it's not to say that all sporting clubs are out, because there are wonderful examples of sporting communities doing amazing things in their communities that have a much broader community impact. And if you have questions about that, you're welcome to contact us at any stage. We have an incredibly supportive team who are on phones and on emails all the time. So please do reach out to them if you have questions on any of those things. So who is eligible to apply? As I've mentioned, not-for-profit organisations with either an incorporation certificate or an ABN. If you're a cooperative or other unincorporated entity, public company or trust, feel free to contact us. Not-for-profit organisations with or without DGR1 endorsement are eligible, and organisations can submit just the one application per grant round. Who isn't eligible to apply? Individuals, sole traders, private or commercial businesses, as previously mentioned, an organisation that is not the legal entity without the written consent of the governing body who holds the ABN or incorporation certificate. Other reasons for ineligibility may be an application has been submitted without financial documentation, a final report from any FRRR grants awarded in the previous 7 years that have not been acquitted. So I guess we look very, ideally we want to be able to have acquittal reports from our successful applicants. This is really important to us, obviously, to understand that the project was completed and to be able to report back to our donors and partners. Yes, it's really important that those acquittal reports are provided. And other reasons for ineligibility and application is for a project or activity that has already occurred prior to the announcement of funding, or the application is incomplete. It's fairly self-explanatory. So in terms of a couple of project examples that I thought might highlight the types of projects that we're looking for, this is a really interesting project that we funded a couple of years ago. It was a feasibility study to use dairy effluent, dairy industry effluent in WA, to look at creating a biogas from that dairy effluent. So obviously with this level of funding, it's not sort of, I guess, fully building the infrastructure to be able to undertake this kind of biogas production, but it was, you know, the very early seed funding to be able to look at the feasibility of doing something like this in the future. And at the time, it was very much the first of its kind, which was really, you know, an amazing initiative to be part of. That's one example. The next one was, as I mentioned earlier, the Bendigo Sustainability Project. So this was looking at running community workshops to be able to talk to communities about clean energy solutions, in particular looking at solar projects, to upskill and educate those in the community about what was available to them, and what were the steps that to take to implementing some of those clean energy solutions. Another example. So the Seymour Community Wetland Restoration Project down in Tasmania. This was a grant that involved some weed eradication and tree planting to restore the native species in this conservation area, to contribute to decarbonisation, and essentially hugely expanded the conservation area down in that region in Tasmania. So for those of you who haven't encountered FRRR before, we do have fairly substantial grant seeker resources on our website, which are fantastic. We have a number of YouTube videos. We have a number of articles. We have our monthly e-news, which is full of tips and project ideas on what other community groups are doing, which is always really inspiring to read. We also have our Know and the How series, which is a webinar series once a month, where we look at a range of different topics, anything from governance for not-for-profit groups through to social media, through to digital scams and connectivity, a whole range of things. So really encourage you to look out for the Know and the How series, and that those will be announced in our monthly e-news. And we also have our incredible team of grants officers at the end of the phone, 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. every day of the week, as well as answering emails. They're all very knowledgeable and supportive. I guess in terms of putting in an application, please do make sure you read the guidelines. They'll be very helpful in terms of making sure that your project is eligible, and to be be eligible, you must be a not-for-profit, as previously mentioned, have an ABN or be incorporated, offer clear public benefit and broader community benefit, and align to the grant purpose of community-led climate solutions. And as I mentioned, I guess presenting that environmental impact is really important, but also demonstrating the economic and social benefits of that project will also be, very highly regarded.
Jill, now we're going to go to questions now, and just to do that, I thought it might be really handy if we went back to what activities can be funded. Just because it's nice to be able to look at those things and take questions and I suppose relate them back to that. I have got a few questions in the chat. First of all, I have a question regarding the installation of electric vehicle chargers at community sites. This is definitely an example of electrification. I suppose what we would be looking for with regards to this is understanding the strategy that's behind it and how that is going to support the community itself, who's actually behind that. We do understand that doing that electrification can also bring really great benefits to towns just by ensuring that people understand they can visit there, they can come in their electric vehicles, but also what kind of education could you do around that as well with regards to electric vehicles and those kind of purposes, I suppose, would just be nice to kind of expand it. I think when we talk about priorities, we often, are looking at what the benefit is to the community. Obviously, there's economic benefits, and you're contributing a climate solution to increasing the availability and use of electric vehicles. So it definitely fits into the grant boundaries if you're coming from a community organisation. We've got another question in the chat, which is about how broad can a project be? I suppose if you look at this, we anticipate this will be quite a competitive round. It is a national grant program. So really you've got $20,000. We want a project that is quite specifically and strongly aligned, with these ideas of, I'm just going to go back to this. The idea of driving engagement, education and leadership in climate solutions. The question here is in regards to managing the concerns of people impacted by bushfires with a review of making the climate safer. Definitely projects that educate and engage on better, I suppose it could be simply regarding the plants that they're using or the environment and how they're working with the environment. I would be careful in regards to it being a project that is more about, I suppose, preparedness. FRRR does have preparedness and recovery funding programs that are available that may better align, particularly if you're from a bushfire impacted community, but also even our SRC grants just generally that are looking to support communities are definitely interested in looking at preparedness, understanding that. So I would be careful at giving something too broad and really making it about the bushfire kind of recovery process and supporting people in that way. I would look more to make sure that you're really presenting a climate solution or really driving that education and engagement with regards to the action that people can take. So I hope that answers your question. I'm just going to check on a few more chats in here. Is the grant only available once every 12 months? That's a really good question. So this is a new grant program from FRRR, and we're actually working with collaborative donors that are really passionate and dedicated to providing climate solutions nationally, and particularly in the areas where you live. We are raising funds at the moment. So this grant program has $360,000 worth of funds in it available for this first round. We are hoping that we will have more funds next year, and we would like to probably be rolling out another program in April and May. So we are looking to increase the funding that we can make available for these kind of projects. So hopefully it will be more than once a year. I have another question in regards to, are you eligible if you have current funding? If you currently have funding from another FRRR program that is, you may have only got it last month or 6 months ago, as long as your final report isn't due, you can still apply for this. That's fine. But if your final report is due, you need to acquit it and then apply. Are we comfortable with co-funding with other funders for a project? Definitely. If you have a larger project that you have funders in and you're looking for more funding, it's natural to be seeking various funders for a significant project. And we also understand that, some projects with regards to this topic may be quite big. So definitely you can have a larger project, and that also relates to a question with regards to discrete parts of funding. You'll find when you go into the application form that we actually ask you what will be funded by this grant. So if you have a bigger project, say you've got a $100,000 project, you're requesting $20,000 for this, and as a part of that project, you may have major infrastructure that's going on, but as a part of that project, you want to be managing the engagement of the community and the education, then you would just kind of list the components of that with regards to either material or engagement, those kind of things. Or there could be, with regards to things like clean energy economies, you might be doing some feasibility studies to explore what's going on, or, actually purchasing a battery and having other contributors to that as well. What do we mean? Sorry, I'll just go to this question because it is the technical side. What do we mean by financial documentation? You'll see in the grant application, we ask you to provide a copy of your most recent audited financials. So that can be from the last 18 months. So that's it. And we do appreciate that organisations are coming from lots of different backgrounds here in regards to, being purely volunteer run, being very small. So, it really is that, kind of profit and loss statement of your last 12 months. If you are a new organisation and you haven't been operating, or you've been operating for less than 12 months, we require you to provide us with a bank statement demonstrating, that you've been set up and you have that established, and just to give us a sense of what kind of transactions are occurring and how you're managing your finances within that, because we appreciate that you won't be able to have an audited statement necessarily at that time. If you've got any challenges with that, please, as Jill said, contact our project officers. They're really experienced at talking to people seeking grants, and we'll understand what you're talking about, because they have spoken to many hundreds of organisations of varying capability and capacity, and can really direct you in what you need to know. Joe, you did ask a little bit more on educating people about why fires are getting worse. I might take that offline with you, just because I think it's a bit complicated. I'd probably like to know more specifically about your project and what you're wanting to do there. And Anna, I've got a question here from you. You're delivering several projects. Are you doing so? And you want to, could you apply for 20,000 to enhance and expand these various projects and use the other funding we have as cash contributions? If the other funding you have is going to actually running the programs, and you want to be scaling them through this, which may include potentially either increasing resources or potentially employing people to support that activity, if I understand it, that would definitely be eligible, scaling an existing program to increase the impact of a project that aligns with the climate solutions activity here is eligible. I'm going to jump off in a minute and just open the floor to questions. So if you want me to expand more on that, I can. The third one, the last one here though, is what are your thoughts about the idea of applying for solar panel installation on a community hall to provide carbon neutral activities to the community? We have put a note in the guidelines with regards to installation of solar panels and community gardens, just because we get a lot of these through a lot of different programs that we have, and we want to ensure that that installation is not just about the operating of that hall, and that you're looking to really expand and engage the community on that. I'd probably be interested in who's doing that installation. There is a great example is in Junee, there's the Junee Power Group, and they are actually helping different organisations in their community to actually be, have solar or alternative energy solutions available for them. So they're kind of expanding that footprint in their community. But definitely if that community hall, and it may be the only community facility in that area, which we're quite familiar with, I think it'd be really interesting to understand the different ways those solar panels actually impact the community and how they're engaged in that project. I've got one more coming through. Alex, I'm going to respond to that question with regards to your organisation. When we send out the presentation, we'll also do a bit of an FAQ. He's just got a question here in regards to, I suppose, auspicing and financial documentation and where organisations sit in their ability to apply or I suppose, establishment. So it might be better that I just provide you with a really good answer in an email that'll go to everyone, and it might be relative to other new organisations as well. And I'll actually share the chat from this as well, because Joe Dodds has just recommended Clean Energy for Eternity, an organisation doing solar on community halls. So it's really great to see everyone collaborating in this space.
So this grant program has been supported for the first round by Boundless Earth and also Hand Heart Pocket up in Queensland. So we're very grateful to them for their enthusiasm for this particular initiative and for our climate in general.
With FRRR, we obviously run a lot of grants. So, we're constantly talking to people and we're constantly reading grants. These are really clear, straightforward kind of, I suppose, guidelines. So I hope they help. We'll have some more questions at the end. And once again, feel free to put more questions in the chat. If we don't answer them in this session, as I said, we'll do a bit of an FAQ when we send the presentation out to you. And so we can answer any questions there as well. So this is kind of my go-to guide for strong grant applications. I always tell people, don't overcomplicate it. Consider you're telling someone a story, and just making sure that you include all the bits of the story that they need to know. So it's clear, simple language. You're not impressing them. But, really understand that we might know much about your organisation, your project, or your community. And be really specific when answering the question, like read the question, and then if it says, how is this community led? Answer it by saying, this grant is community led by the organisation, having representatives from across the community who have expressed, a need for this project. We are asking for evidence, and we know that some climate solutions activity is very complicated, but try and avoid technical language and define words where necessary, just to support us. We've been doing a lot of reading and kind of building our own expertise in developing this grant program, but we know we're going to also learn a lot by doing it. So please help us along with that. Do use evidence to support claims. You don't need to put rafts of data into your application, but possibly a link or an attachment where it's available in the documentation, if you feel you want to support us to, have a greater clarity on exactly what you're talking about. As I said, the grant application does ask how you're going to use these specific requested funds. So just make sure you think about that as well. As Julian said, we can't support like sponsorship or prizes or those kind of things. So if you're doing a big event and you're wanting to, give things away, all that kind of stuff, we just consider you find another either sponsor or bucket of money to actually do that activity, and understand that this funding really needs to align with what is charitable in the project that's being delivered. Spell out any acronyms. Once again, we may not understand what they're referencing, and just use facts, not opinions. So the following is some really good kind of, I suppose, examples. First of all, what's your idea? Are you solving an issue or building on a great opportunity for your community? So I think the question in there in regards to, an electric vehicle charger, I'm sure that's an idea that many communities are seeing as potential to both support them as an economy, having people coming through, but also support their local community to look to greater electric vehicle kind of purchasing, because they will be supported where they live. So really, what's the community benefit, and what will happen if you don't do this project? That's always, I think, really important. It helps us all kind of prioritise, what we need to do and why things are really important. If you can include more groups in your projects, you never know what other support might be out there, and it looks really good to assessors when we're trying to understand, I suppose, who is involved in the community. So a really good example, we've heard that young people are struggling. We think this is a good idea. That can be a bit vague. Go for something like green, our consultation, our Vox Pop, our listening posts. This is where we gathered information. And this is what we've been doing. Once again, telling that story about how you've actually come to this project. The who is really important. And once again, that can also relate to, what your group is, if you come from another organisation. You can be auspiced in this program to deliver if you don't actually meet the eligibility criteria, but just understanding the relationship of everyone that's involved in the project is really, really important. And also looking, I think, as Jill said, that this is an inclusive project that will really benefit and bring everyone along on the journey. We talk about just transitions here, and while that very much relates to energy transitions, we also know that just as we move towards new solutions in our communities, the more people that are involved and engaged, kind of the bigger benefit we're going to have. Also, I suppose with these things, it's understanding the expertise that sits behind some potentially more complicated projects. The how, when, and where. Once again, this comes down to storytelling, in really, telling us what the key project stages, tasks, resources, and responsibility. What are the critical project dates, and things about the project site that we may not know that you may be assuming. In addition to, once again, things like community hall. Who owns them? We have a lot of experience with community halls, so we understand often there's, the state government or the local council or certain committees have been set up and given authority to run community halls, or you may have a long lease on a building. So it's really telling us that kind of background information, so we don't we're not kind of asking questions and scratching our heads about how this is going to happen and who's going to benefit from a significant installation into a facility. Once again, this is a really good example of, someone kind of saying to us, well, we think the project might happen in May, but this might happen. So just, if you've got a time frame and also saying, this could be interrupted by, poor weather or this kind of activity, particularly if you're doing, community engagement events. We've all experienced COVID and also, the myriad of disruptions that have occurred through disasters over the last few years. FRRR is very sympathetic to things that go, things that change, but be as specific as you can be in just answering the questions and planning for success. Once again, the budget, we have a template in the application that makes it, I hope, very clear with regards to what your expenditure is and what your income is. We understand that often you might be fundraising and applying for other grants that are also going to contribute towards this project. Where that's happening, we like to see you kind of, you might say you've applied for a state government grant as well. And the thing there, you indicate if it's confirmed or not. We appreciate you're applying for this grant now. It's not going to be announced until March next year. So you've got a lot of balls in the air and you're trying to get things across the line. So it's not a negative that you haven't got all the funding together yet. It's actually demonstrating to us that you're doing the work, that you really know how you're going to do things. That kind of gives us strength in understanding how feasible the project is and who's behind it and how they're thinking about it. Things like co-contributions as well, where you've got partners or supporters that are contributing. It's really valuable for us to understand who those people are, what their relationship is in your community, because often it demonstrates that great support in the community. And the in-kind is always really telling in regards to the services and labour that's provided voluntarily locally. I will put the caveat on that, though, that some more sophisticated projects, just need professionals to do the work, and there's no, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes there's not necessarily an in-kind opportunity, but do be conscious that if you're a volunteer organisation, the hours that you put into this project in designing it is all really valid in-kind contribution. Really, that writing a strong grant application, align your project to the grant purpose. Plan your application, start now. You've got 30 days. you know, and call us if you've got any questions during that time. If anything comes up, and just, you know, really think back to what happens if we don't get this grant. You know, tell us that compelling story about why this isn't so important. And also, I suppose, why it aligns really strongly with this program. And if in, you know, kind of thinking about your story, you're unsure if the alignment to this grant is great, look at other FRRR grant programs. We are running a quarterly Strengthening Rural Communities grant that has really broad objectives to just benefiting remote, rural and regional communities in enhancing their community outcomes. So if you're not familiar with this, please have a look at that. If this isn't the right grant for you, then we do want to try and support you in other ways. With regards to the assessment, this program is assessed in the first place by myself and my program officer and then we look at how it aligns to the criteria and how strong the project is and how it meets all those requirements that we've laid out. We then take it to the assessment committee, which includes senior people in the FRRR organisation, members of our board with experience specifically in this area, and also representatives of our donors. So I can let you know that there's a very robust and fair application process in looking at how we can make sure these grants are awarded across Australia to organisations and projects that are deserving and really looking to make a change in their community. The FRRR board is the final approver of the grants, so we have a very robust governance system in place. Now, I'm going to ask quickly if there's any more questions. I'll have a quick look at the chat. Jeff, just letting you know, we are sending out the slides. Joe, I will answer what auspice means in my frequently asked questions. I'm glad that most people have found this good as a guideline and an opportunity, I suppose, to hear us speak about the grant program and also grant seeking. As I said, the grant seeker resources on FRRR's website are really valuable. As I said, all those things in regards to community needs, project planning, measuring success, applying and reporting with FRRR, everything in there is covered, often with videos, which are always a really nice way to learn. Don't forget that the grant does close on the 30th of November. That's 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So if you are in Western Australia or South Australia, please make sure you've aligned your clocks with us over here. If you have any issues with the portal, the grant portal, please get in touch with us as soon as possible so we can support you in actually managing through that system. Or give you an alternative if it's, you know, really required. We kind of recommend that you subscribe to FRRR's monthly newsletter and also use our sorting hat to see where there might be other grant opportunities available for you.
I think the only thing I've got to add is that, yeah, it's fabulous to see so many people on the line, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the exciting initiatives and projects that are out there, and I guess, yeah, a really great opportunity to shine and to get some rare support in this area. So please do throw your hat in the ring and reach out to us if you need support.
Thank you very much, and once again, best of luck. We will send out these slides in the next 48 hours. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.